No.
Okay. I don't have to call. I don't know. I probably even call my girlfriend and ask her to help funds.
Tears, happy, sad, sincere, or of a crocodile influence, always say something to homicide investigators working on a case. In this week's episode, it takes decades, but two determined investigators finally find the answer to a murder in which the wrong man had been targeted all along. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the New York Times best-selling author of dozens of true crime books. I've dedicated the past 26 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. It's called the Village of Drummond, an exclusive neighborhood in Chevy Chase, Maryland, with 41 homes lining the streets. Chevy Chase is just north of Washington, D.C., near Bethesda. Despite its widespread popularity, mainly based on the name, I think, Chevy Chase is a small town with about 10,000 residents. Even less in 2001, when this case begins. The median price tag for a home in Chevy Chase is about $1.6 million. So this is a pretty swanky town, I will say. High-end living, upscale lifestyles. It's May on Drummond Avenue, 2001. And as you might imagine, spring is in the air. The street is bursting with blossoming sweet bay magnolias, which are these fragrant, creamy white flowers, some the size of basketballs. The dogwoods and the tulip trees, to name a few, are just popping as well. People are out and about, walking dogs, riding bikes, washing their cars, pruning shrubs, and getting on with the season's planting. Leslie Prier and her husband Sandy live at the 4800 block of Drummond in a red brick colonial, a beautiful piece of property, very much in the realm of what you'd see all around the Maryland, D.C. area. Leslie is 49 years old, extremely pretty in a Christian crooner, Amy Grant kind of way. She was born in Quonset Point, Rhode Island in 1952 into a military family, and they finally settled in Pensacola, Florida by 1963. Leslie's family describes her as fun-loving, kind, gentle, and giving, with a sensitivity and gentleness you don't normally find in people. The type of woman who would put herself before most anyone else. Leslie works with her husband at an advertising production company. She and Sandy, whose first name is actually Carl, have been married since 1974. The couple share one daughter. It's late morning on May 2nd, and Leslie is not at work. Odd she hasn't shown up or isn't answering the phone at home. So her husband and a coworker head over to the house to see what's holding her up. As they walk in and approach the foyer into the house, the first thing they see is blood smeared in several places. Looking into the living room, they are baffled by furniture that has been toppled over and moved, and also some blood stains on the carpet. What they don't see is Leslie. None of this is a good sign. "We better call 911, one of them says. In that call, Leslie's coworker claims that he and Leslie's husband just walked in the door and found blood in the foyer, and it's looking like something possibly happened inside the house. They are very concerned. The last time Leslie's husband had seen her, he claims, was at 7:45 that morning. They have no idea where she is. The coworker then explains to the 911 dispatcher that they are still inside the house. He explains that Leslie's husband is going from room to room looking around for her. Dispatch tells the man to get out of the house and wait for police to arrive. When officers show up, they head into the house with caution. None of this feels right. Clearing the downstairs, as they say in police parlance, one officer heads up the stairs to check out the second floor. Looking inside the bathroom, the officer sees a woman, Leslie. She is lying face down on the floor, and part of her body is in the shower, the other half outside the shower. She appears to have been severely and violently beaten, with cuts all over her head, bruises all over her arms, legs, and torso, and it looks like, though they cannot be certain, she has been strangled to death. Of course, investigators are called in to take a look at what happened. The husband, Sandy, apparently left to go to work and things were fine at home, he claims. When she didn't show up and failed to answer calls, he grew concerned and headed over to the house with a coworker. In going door to door, investigators run into a neighbor who says that some strange things were going on in the house the previous night. It was unlike what he had seen in the prior house generally. Every light was on and the drapes were all closed. I just felt that it was unusual, he tells investigators. I guess that could be considered strange in the light of what happened. But come on, what does that actually mean? The go-to here is obviously the husband. This is what law enforcement think right away. A domestic incident turns violent, the husband snaps, the wife ends up dead. But I'll say this, looking at the crime scene and the way in which Leslie Prior was murdered, it doesn't scream domestic incident to me. After a day or so, Sandy is asked to come in and sit down for an interview. Go through the days before his wife was murdered and what they did the previous night. Sandy calls Leslie his absolute love, a beauty, but cautions that statement by saying she's wonderful when she doesn't drink. He talks about how much she drank and how her drinking was one of the reasons why he would work late and then not come home until bedtime. It was getting hard to deal with, he tells investigators. What did you do the previous night, they ask. I ran some errands, stopped at the dump, went to 3 different stores searching for a battery charger. Pretty normal suburban stuff. Investigators sit and listen to the guy and think, he is perhaps trying to construct an alibi, placing himself outside the home. So immediately they latch on to Sandy. He's their guy. This sort of investigative process, if you will, is quite common. And I will say that critical thinking in this situation is immensely important. Here you have a husband whose wife has been murdered inside their home. He says he wasn't home and she was okay when he left for work. He and a coworker find the body. Investigators get a sense he is acting kind of sketchy, creating for himself a reason to be out of the home and speaking of Nancy as if she had issues. And they consider the idea that he is creating tension between them, which never existed. What I am trying to say is this. If you go into this thinking the husband did it, all of his actions, either consciously or subconsciously to you, will fill any void of doubt you might have. Everything he says begins to fit into a murder narrative, which has been created out of nothing more than a feeling and a theory these investigators have. This is dangerous. It doesn't do the victim any service. As an investigator, and I say this all the time on this show, you have to follow your instincts, your gut. But you also have to involve critical thinking, even when it pertains to your own thoughts. And these cops looking into Leslie's murder, well, their gut is telling them that the husband is hiding something, that he is guilty. Now, if it's me, and I don't pretend to be smarter than any investigator, but based on talking to detectives all over this country, I am confident the next move here is to look at the husband's life. See what he has been doing, any affairs, any financial problems, issues at work, etc. Develop a profile of the guy. As you do that, forensics will begin to go through the crime scene, and perhaps DNA or blood evidence will put the guy in the hot seat or perhaps rule him out. Instead of doing that here, however, investigators go to Sandy and ask him if he is willing to take a polygraph. He says, of course, anything he can do to help, anything he can do to relieve their suspicions about him and move on so they can get out there and find the man who killed his wife. Sandy sits down. It's several days now after the murder. One other issue investigators are facing is that over the past 20 months, some 6 murders of females have gone unsolved in Montgomery County, Maryland, which had prompted local law enforcement to create a task force to solve the cases. They come right out and say they do not believe there is a link among them, but do not know for certain. So there's that. After finishing the lie detector test, Sandy waits for investigators to come out and talk to him. The thing is, once the husband in any of these cases is branded as suspicious, the public, as we all know, sees this person as guilty regardless of the evidence, circumstantial or otherwise. You failed, investigators tell Sandy. He's stunned. Failed? Yes, you failed the polygraph. Let's take our first break and come back with more Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps. If you have not already, check out my Sony Music Entertainment podcast On The Binge, Fatal Fantasy, wherever you get your favorite shows. And of course, my iHeartMedia podcast franchise, now in season 5, Paper Ghosts, the Texas Teen Murders. Be back in 1 minute. I'd like to talk about, which I don't really think I have at any length on this show, the polygraph, lie detector testing. I'd first start with a question to you, my listeners. How would you feel about an electronic machine deciding if you were being truthful or not? Faced with the situation, how would you feel sitting down and answering questions which could decide your future and your freedom as a machine judged your response? Personally, I would be scared shitless to say the wrong thing, not to recall something correctly, or to undertake the test on an off day, per se. Remember, polygraphs measure physical changes thought to be associated with lying: blood pressure, heart rate, respiration, perspiration, and even skin conductivity. And a polygraph, many examiners I have spoken to personally tell me, is only as accurate as the examiner is competent and the right questions are being asked. Also, it's the pre-polygraph interview that establishes a baseline of truth. So there's a lot of moving parts here with a lie detector test. A lot of moving parts, I will say, that can go wrong. So how much accuracy can we put into Sandy's polygraph results. If I am an investigator working this case, I would view it as part of the whole. It's one tool, not a solution. It can help lead you down a path toward the truth, but it cannot become the vehicle getting you there. If I am Sandy, I am done talking to police and helping them. They seem to be focused on him and not looking anywhere else. That situation can easily become a train heading off the rails. But Sandy continues to try to answer their questions. On May 24th, 2001, Sandy sits with two detectives inside a Montgomery County interrogation room. Sandy is a professional-looking guy wearing a white shirt, black tie, and glasses. He seems very calm. At one point in this interview, a balding cop, kind of smug and dumpy and trying to play the tough guy role, says this: "We all know who was responsible. It's just a matter of getting to the truth of it all." Sandy doesn't flinch. He stares down the detective. "We want you to explain to us what drove all of this," the detective continues. "Give us a break. Give yourself a break. It's got to be a living nightmare. Your family is wondering. Everybody is wondering." The detective then goes on to say how people are reading the newspapers and drawing a conclusion that because the police haven't picked up anyone yet, the public doesn't need to be rocket scientists, as he puts it, to piece together that you did this, Sandy. Just talk to us about this, Sandy, and get it over with. The line that gets me comes next, when the detective, running out of options and getting no response from Sandy, says this: "You are the one that gets to decide which way this is going to go." Again, Sandy does not move a muscle or say anything during this entire speech the detective gives, trying to push Sandy into confessing. That's what this is. They're putting pressure on this guy to confess to something he says he did not do. Finally, Sandy stretches his arms and says, "Let me say this. I will stay here all night with you guys and listen to you talk. And I am going to repeat, I am not saying anything unless my lawyer is here." He tells them repeatedly, "I am telling the truth. I had nothing to do with this." After this interview, not having a shred of physical or forensic evidence against Sandy, the case, as it were, begins to sort of peter out. Nothing else connects Sandy to this murder besides a few vague feelings from investigators, the idea they claim he is acting suspiciously, and a failed polygraph. You'd certainly need more than that to take it to a judge and have him or her sign an arrest warrant. And these cops, they know that. In the reports of the case, it's clear they were looking at what they called Sandy's movements on the night of the murder, the next day, and those after. The reports also mention Sandy's reaction to some of the questions they asked. According to them, all of this leads to probable cause where Sandy is concerned. And so they kept their focus on Sandy. But where is the evidence besides assumptions and hunches from investigators? It's even a stretch to say at this point the case against Sandy is circumstantial. They have nothing. As far as tangible evidence goes, investigators are waiting on bated breath for forensics to come back with some sort of picture of the crime scene. What have analysts found? Whose DNA is present, and what type of DNA do they have? There's no doubt Leslie's killer left DNA behind. You cannot kill a woman that violently and not leave a hair or a skin cell at the crime scene. Sandy's DNA is obviously all over the house because he lived there. But that should be in the form of skin cells, maybe feeble amounts of blood from cutting himself shaving or nicking a finger, something along those lines. A good defense lawyer would have a field day in court with that sort of DNA used to charge Sandy. Forensics finally come back, and they have some surprising news to report. I'll get into that next. Be right back. They have found skin underneath Leslie's fingernails and blood, which they say is not hers. So it's pretty clear she fought her attacker. The skin underneath her nails is from a male. However, it is not a match to Sandy, her husband. With that information, the heat is finally cranked down from underneath Sandy's feet. Though something tells me the two detectives I saw in the interrogation video interviewing Sandy probably still thought he was behind the murder. And I will say, slapping these two guys around a little bit more here, which we like to do from time to time on Crossing the Line, where it is justified. These two investigators were lazy. They got themselves into this mindset that the husband did it and they would not let up, back down, or look elsewhere with any tenacity. Blinders can take an investigation and bring it to a screeching halt. Good investigators go with their hunches, their guts, but keep themselves open to any possible scenario until they can prove otherwise. Having been forced to take the investigation into a new direction, law enforcement is now stumped. They question others but quickly rule them out. Then the case goes ice cold. They, of course, place the DNA samples they have into CODIS. But if this guy has never been arrested and his DNA is not on file, that will not lead them anywhere. And so time passes. A lot of time. Years, in fact. Decades. Nothing new comes in. Any leads they do get amount to nothing. Leslie's killer is walking the streets a free man and will perhaps do this again. They do not even have a motive. They suspect it was a botched burglary attempt and the intruder didn't think anyone was at home. But who knows? So now Sandy and Leslie's daughter, Lauren, in her 20s at the time, calls investigators and demands to have an update in her mother's case. Can you imagine what the daughter, an adult woman, is going through? Having been told her own father is under suspicion and now this DNA comes back and it's from an unknown male? If your dad is not involved in this, investigators tell the daughter, it's got to be someone who has a reason to be in the house. For decades, the case sits and grows a thick layer of frost. They look at suspects, but no one fits into the matrix of the case as far as the DNA is concerned. Leslie participated in solving her own murder by gouging her attacker and making sure that his skin got underneath her nails, but that DNA means nothing unless you have samples to match it up to. Then, two female detectives in the early 2020s working in the Montgomery County Cold Case Unit decide to take a look at this case. They think this case is the perfect candidate for forensic genetic genealogy. With all of the advancements made since Leslie's murder, it's time now to dig into the genetic markers of the killer and try to tie his DNA to a family member somewhere. After receiving an enhanced DNA profile from an outside lab, they begin building and analyzing several family trees to understand the relationships and proximity to the DNA sample they have in Leslie's case. For almost 2 years, they dig and dig, going through a large volume of what are called low-match DNA results. When they finish that task, some of their results trace back to existing American family trees in the online databases, which is a very good sign. So you see how labor-intensive forensic genetic genealogy is? It takes them years to get to this point. Then they finally come to the highest DNA match with Leslie's killer, and that result links directly to one particular family back in Romania. Romania. With all of that information, one of the cold case investigators is searching through public records and articles for this Romanian connection, and she comes across a name within that family line, Gligor. And that name rings a bell for both investigators. They had seen it somewhere in the file. So they then go back into the original case file reports just after the murder and begin to search. Digging through reports, there it is, that name, Gligor. Way back when this investigation first started, a neighbor of Sandy and Leslie's had said something about Lauren, their daughter's ex-boyfriend, Eugene Gligor, which alone sends up alarm bells for the detectives. And this was at the very earliest stages of the investigation when those two investigators were hyper-focused on Sandy, Leslie's husband. This lead, the daughter's ex-boyfriend, was never run down. Turns out Eugene Gligor is the first cousin twice removed within their original genetic genealogy family tree match back in Romania. Gligor doesn't have a criminal record of any sort. He's a wiry, lanky, geeky-looking dude with dark curly hair, a beard, and large-frame glasses. Leslie's daughter, Lauren, had dated him through much of high school, but like a lot of high school romances, it ended, and they went their separate ways. In fact, when they look, the new cold case investigators see that not long after Leslie's murder, Eugene Gligor moved 3,000 miles away to Oregon. The pieces seem to be fitting together, but they need to be certain. Smart, savvy, and dedicated investigators do not play within the bounds of speculation. They don't mess around. They hate to waste time. So, these two fearless women decide that Eugene Gligor should be followed. It's now 2024. They find out he is coming into Dulles Airport outside Washington, D.C., and they initiate a tail on him through the airport. Investigators watch him as he drinks from a water bottle during screening by U.S. Customs. Gligor then tosses the bottle in the trash. They retrieve it. Now they have his DNA. A quick test, and they can rule this particular Gligor in or out and move on to the next Gligor family member. I'll be right back to conclude this episode after a final break. You are listening to Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps. When this DNA test comes back from that water bottle, that skin underneath Leslie's fingernails turns out to be a near 100% match to Leslie's daughter's ex-boyfriend, Eugene Gligor. The blood at the scene they had found, that comes back the same. Eugene Gligor is their killer. There can be no doubt about it. On June 15, 2024, an arrest warrant for Gligor is signed. On June 21st, U.S. Marshals head out to arrest the guy and bring him into the station to answer some questions. Now, I played a tape at the very top of the show, that dude crying. That's Gligor. Let's revisit that and hear some more of what he has to say. It's a brilliant display of narcissism and, I would argue, sociopathic tendencies.
Going through the case file, your name was in there. as someone that was related to the family, whether we have a big list of people, but friends, family, something like that. So do you recall back in 2001, Leslie Preer?
Yes, that she was murdered. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So that's the case that we are investigating. You went to BCC with her daughter at the time?
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay. And what was your relationship with Lauren, the daughter?
We had dated.
Okay. And when did you guys date? Do you remember years?
Exact dates, I'm not entirely sure.
Were you in high school or was it after high school?
Yeah, it was high school. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. Maybe like 1994 to 1997 or something around there.
Okay.
So there you have Eugene Gligor. After just sitting down, unable to recall when he was in high school and, maybe 1994, he says, leaning on that pause, So there's that. Let's hear a little more. Here, they ask him where he was living at the time of the murder.
With my mother in Rockville.
Okay. Do you remember the address or what street or anything?
I wish I did. I don't.
Okay. And you said you lived with your mother. Were your parents separated?
Yeah.
Okay. Where did your dad live?
He lived in Chevy Chase, and yeah.
Do you know the street or neighborhood? Or?
Brookside Drive.
Brookside Drive. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you and Lauren had dated well before her mother was killed.
Just want to pipe in before we hear more and say that Brookside, where he says his father lived, is about 1 mile from where Leslie and the Preer family lived. Basically, right around the corner. Again, I want to point out that the original investigators, had they not been lazy and hyper-focused on Sandy, could have figured all of this out themselves.
How well did you know Lauren's mom? Like, was there ever any kind of a weird relationship between you two after Lauren?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't in touch, so I don't...
Okay. So you were never, like, dating Lauren's mom or anything like that behind the scenes?
No.
Okay.
I wasn't ever in touch, that...
Okay. So the reason that we wanted to talk to you is because a lot of the people whose names are in the case file, they've been interviewed throughout the years and they've been asked to give DNA samples to compare to DNA from the crime scene. And pretty much everybody that's in the list has been talked to, has been eliminated as a suspect. Your name was actually in the file, but they never reached out to you or never spoke to you for some reason. So that's why we wanted to reach out to you and see if you recall anything about the time when Leslie was killed, anything that you remember about your life at the time that like could be relevant, any relationships you had with the family or anything like that.
I really don't recall.
Okay. So from the crime scene.
I really don't recall, he says. You can hear the smarmy attitude in his tone as if he can just, I don't recall his way out of this. I will say, these two detectives are brilliant at questioning the guy. The way they lead up to the big reveal just throws this clown completely off his axis.
From the crime scene, we have DNA from the person who was there when Leslie died. So there's Leslie's blood all over the place, obviously, but then there's also another DNA profile that was picked up from the crime scene. And we had put that into CODIS, our database from the National CODIS DNA Index System, and it has never hit. So whoever was there, whoever's DNA was also on the scene, has never been arrested. And that's why we were going through doing all these elimination DNA samples to find out, okay, well, this person couldn't have done it because we matched their DNA to it. So we realized that they never talked to you, never did anything, and we wanted to find out more about you and if there was any kind of situation where you could have been at the house at that time.
I'm a little confused. So to find out more and talk to me, why not just call me and ask me to come in and talk to me versus have marshals come and arrest me and bring me in? I'm just confused as to why that's the case.
Well, because we needed to talk to you in a controlled environment, and because there's a little bit more to it than what we've told you so far.
Could you tell me?
Well, we're getting there. I'm trying to give you an opportunity to be a little bit forthcoming before we...
I mean, I feel a little bit trapped here, like...
Well, you're under arrest, so you should feel trapped.
Right, and so I think, I mean, probably asking for a lawyer is my best course of action at this point.
Okay.
Instead of doing any more discussing or talking about it, it just doesn't seem... I don't understand, so I'd like to have somebody...
Well, that's why we're trying to talk to you about it.
I know.
But we can't...
And there's two of you and one of me, so sure. I feel a little outnumbered, and I probably would need some type of representation if I am under arrest, as you said, which I am.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I think that having a lawyer would be the best for me in my interest at this point.
That's totally fine. And we don't have to ask you any more questions, but we are going to just talk.
When I said earlier this is classic narcissistic behavior, what I meant was that Gligor, in this situation, truly believes he is smarter than these two schooled investigators, and he can play the stupid card and get out of this. And as soon as he realizes they have evidence against him, boom, he tosses that "I want my lawyer" card on the table. Next, they drop the big bombshell on him, and his reaction is, honestly, hilariously absurd.
Tell you some stuff.
Okay.
So from the crime scene, the DNA that was taken, we actually have a sample of your DNA, and it was compared to the crime scene DNA, and it matched. So we know that you were there at the time when Leslie died.
But I never gave a sample of DNA.
That's correct. We obtained a sample from a discarded water bottle that you drank out of. So you were followed, and we collected it after you discarded it into the trash, and it was swabbed, and it was compared. So your DNA matches the crime scene DNA.
You have to love this moment as much as I do. The look on his face, if you could see it, the posture of his body, which changes. You almost get a sense of him wanting to jump out of his chair and do to these investigators what he did to Leslie. And then there's the pleading.
I don't know what to say. I have no recollection. I have no memory. I don't know what to say.
Okay, well, that's why we wanted to talk to you, to find out if there's any other explanation.
And of course, the crocodile tears.
Ask you any more questions if you want a lawyer present.
Yeah, I think I should have a lawyer present. I don't know what to do or say. It doesn't make sense to me, so I don't know. I don't know what to do.
Do you have a lawyer that you...
No.
Okay.
I don't have to call. I don't know. I probably would call my girlfriend and ask her to help find somebody. I don't know.
We wanted to try to see if there was another angle or another side to this story. And, we know
why would
that...
my DNA be there?
That's what we're trying to figure out.
So, I don't know. I don't know. I was in the house, but it was years before,
Correct.
When I dated her.
Correct.
I don't know. I wish I could tell you. I don't know. bewildering, very strange.
From there, we go to absolute nonsense.
I don't know. I can't verify. I don't know. I don't recall. I don't have any memory. I didn't do anything that you're talking about, so I don't know. And I don't feel like I can... I don't know how to answer and go into... I don't want to try to incriminate myself with questions. You guys are professionals. I'm not. I don't know. I really do think I need an attorney. I need to use the phone, and I need to call someone, and I need legal representation before I respond to anything else.
Okay, that's fine. We're not going to ask you any more questions.
One of the investigators then makes an observation that with all the crying he is doing, no tears are coming out of him. He's fake crying, which you can clearly hear in this audio. All of it is an act. And his response to what she says is gold.
Dry right now.
You're dry?
I'm very dry. I'm parched. I'm dehydrated. You can probably see my eyes are bloodshot red because I'm just tired and drained. I don't know what's going on. You want me to drink water so I can tear? Like, what is wrong with you?
I don't want you to tear. I just don't want
you to... What are you trying to say?
I'm just trying to say that this seems a little put on.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
No.
Oh my God, you're so full of it. You're after. This is the police. This is, yes, like it makes sense. You know, it's in your eyes, it's guilty until proven innocent. I get it.
Well, honey, your DNA was in the crime scene. That's why, like, and there's a reason.
There's due process, right? Sure. Due process. So you're saying I'm guilty before I've even been put into a court of law?
I'm saying that there's probable cause to believe that you were there when
I think what you were saying was the contrary to that. So, okay. But I don't remember. I don't know. No, I don't know.
What we're trying to figure out is how your blood was at the scene that day.
If there's an alternate explanation, that's why we wanted to talk to you today, okay? So I feel like you just need to take a breath for a second, okay? That's what we're trying to figure out. Why is your blood there?
Could it have been, an interrupted burglary? Did something happen where you didn't expect anybody to be home?
I have no idea. I don't remember. I don't recall. Again, you're asking me questions. I don't know.
I'm not asking you a question.
You did. You just asked me a question, and I asked for legal representation, okay. And you guys are very smug looking at me like I've done something, and of course it's innocent until proven guilty, right? Sure. Am I wrong or am I right?
You are entitled to your due process. Absolutely.
This isn't...
In the end, Gligor makes one more attempt at trying to con his way out of this by having his lawyer explain in a motion to the court that on the morning of the murder, Gligor had blacked out because of all the alcohol and cocaine he had been using. His selective memory doesn't fly for prosecutors, however. When they confront him with the idea that he cleaned up blood inside the house, then tossed cleaning materials in the trash, and then he left Maryland and moved to Oregon. The guy is a liar and a killer. Realizing he will be absolutely buried at trial, Gligor pleads out his case to second-degree murder. Prosecutors pressed Gligor for a motive, but he fails to give them one. My bet is he doesn't give him a motive because that motive would have branded him a target in prison, so he kept it to himself. In August 2025, Judge David Lease sentenced Gligor to 30 years, suspended after 22 years. Seems like a vacation for a man who violently killed a woman. Only Eugene Gligor knows why he killed Leslie. And my guess is he went there to sexually assault her and she fought him off, so he panicked, killed her, and took off. I don't like to smack cops down, but look, I cannot leave this one without saying more savvy investigators with open minds and the willingness to accept the truth, no matter where it led, would have nailed Gligor within months after the murder and spared Sandy Prieur 23 years of people looking at him as if he had murdered his wife, let alone his daughter having to decide what to believe. Let's end with the important words of the state's attorney after Gligor's sentencing, as he talks about the real tragedy of this case, beyond, that is, Leslie's murder.
For 23 years, Sandy, the loving husband of the victim in this case, was under the specter of being the killer. He died. He left the remainder of his life. And I know many of the family members talked about this. Sandy, who was a person that the family was, it was tough. It actually divided the family. The majority didn't think he did it, but some just didn't know. But an innocent man lived the remainder of his life under the specter of having taken the life of his wife, and he did not. His daughter, who he loves, who is with us today, had to live her lifetime for 23 years with the specter that possibly her father took her mother's life while she still maintained a life with her father. There is cruelty in that.
That's it for this week. Be safe, be aware. Sources for this episode include Murderer of Chevy Chase Mom to Serve 22 Years in Prison by Elia Griffin, Bethesda Today, August 28, 2025. Montgomery County Police Reports and Court Filings. Crossing the Line is executive produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, and Matthew Valentinus, Mom's Basement Management. Written by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Music by Epidemic Sound. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.